to welcome you to today's session, Nature Meets Nurture, Balancing Development and Conservation. As we gather here during COP, the urgency of finding solutions that bridge the gap between sustainable development and environmental stewardship has never been greater. Today we stand at a crossroads. Our planet's ecosystem are under threat, yet the need for economic growth and social progress is undeniable. How do we ensure that conservation efforts don't come at the cost of development and vice versa? The answer lies in innovation, in new financial models, bold partnerships, and inclusive strategies that prioritize people and planet. This session brings together thought leaders from the World Bank, African Development Bank, to discuss how we can unlock finance to drive both climate resilience and inclusive growth. Together, we'll explore how institutions are leveraging green finance, nature-based solutions, and private sector engagement to tackle these interconnected challenges, and how we can accelerate action to safeguard our future. Without further ado, I would love to begin the critical conversation we have before us and introduce the panelists. So Veronica Jones is Global Head of Advisory Services for Infrastructure and Natural Resources at IFC. Her team helps companies that share values through delivery of tangible benefits to local stakeholders in emerging markets. She advises clients to operate sustainably in changing environments due to shifts in demographics and innovations in technology and communications. Veronica, join me, please. Gareth Phillips is manager of the Climate and Environment Finance Division in the African Development Bank, based in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. Gareth has over 25 years of experience in climate change and sustainability, trained as a forester. Gareth has worked in a wide variety of sectors on GHG accounting, inventory verification, and other trading systems. Gareth. Yotamu is a seasoned senior executive with extensive domestic and international experience in banking and financial services, with a deep specialization in treasury strategy, P&L oversight, and product development. Yotamu has worked with a diverse range of financial institutions, from startups to large-scale organizations. Do we have Yotamu? Thank you. Emmanuel Ibula is a multi-skilled professional with a broad range of expertise across risk, corporate finance, financial analysis, investment analysis, FX trading, and business advisory. As the head of strategic at Stanbic, Emmanuel combines his extensive training and hands-on experience to drive strategic initiatives that enhance business performance and growth. And finally, Charlie is a resilient, results-oriented leader with a strong focus on driving growth. As acting Chief Commercial Officer at Zambia National Commercial Bank, Charlie works with C-suite executives and the board to shape corporate strategy and enhance performance across retail business, transactional, and corporate banking. So first, if you don't mind, I would like to invite Veronica to speak to some of the innovative financial models that IFC works with. What is it that you are seeing in the markets, and how can we use these types of tools, whether it be blended finance or green bonds, to drive conservation and economic growth? Let me get you a microphone. Please.
No, you can't hear me? How's that? Better? Okay, great. So happy to meet you all. I loved hearing my bio coming in because that's actually the job that I had a year ago, which I loved, and I still work very closely with those folks. But very quickly, I'm now in the climate business group at IFC. So we are the International Finance Corporation, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, and I head up our global climate capacity and inclusion accelerator. Within that, we have the issues of nature finance, also circular economy, inclusion, transition finance, and also a lot of capacity building externally. And I just mentioned that because I'm going to touch on some of those areas and would love to follow up with anybody afterwards who is interested. So at IFC, raise your hand if you know IFC. Oh, awesome. You're making my job so easy. Okay. So then I'm just going to jump right in. So in FY24, the World Bank Group, which is our family, delivered $43 billion of climate finance. IFC, the private sector arm, where we're all focused on eradicating poverty, boosting prosperity on a livable planet. The IFC did about $19 billion of climate finance last year. Half of that is in our own account. More than half was mobilized from other sponsors. And I think a big part of what we want to talk about here today is the instruments that we're using to increase nature finance, but also how we mobilize others to jump on board with us, because we all recognize that the scale of nature investment that is required is not only going to take public dollars, philanthropic dollars, but also an increasing amount of private sector dollars, both from individual companies and particularly from capital markets. So please let me know if you're having trouble hearing me at all, okay? So at IFC, I was actually in Cali a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how many of you were there at Biodiversity COP. And one of the things somebody said that really struck me was, we've always been living in a bioeconomy. We're just now starting to act like it. So we act like, investing in bioeconomy is some new idea. Our entire economy has always been based on nature, and we're just slowly coming to terms with the fact that we're so dependent on it and we're repleting it and we need to regenerate it. So I would like to tell you very quickly 5 things that we're doing and give you 5 kind of tangible examples which we hope are really replicable and serve as demonstration effect in the market, right? Because we are, in fact, quite a small player, but we hope that the things that we do will kind of be seeds and catch fire. So has anybody here heard of our biodiversity finance guidelines that were issued a few years ago? I know it's a really sexy topic, but as a bank, we fundamentally believe that the traditional ways of thinking about conservation are not getting the job done, right? So again, public dollars and donors are not going to be sufficient to conserve, restore, and regenerate nature in the way that our lives, our communities, our ecosystems need, and also that our businesses and our production models need. So we need like a whole of economy transformation in this space. We've gotten used to talking about that in the context of mitigation and emissions, but when it comes to nature, we're still catching up with the radical shift that we need to go into. We are still thinking about how we use nature to produce products. We're not designing enough regeneration in the way that we're producing. We're not thinking about enough in how we're consuming. So we need to move from this vicious cycle that we've all gotten used to over hundreds of years to a more virtuous cycle. And we fundamentally believe that actually development and investing in nature and regenerating and preserving nature go hand in hand. So there is no competition here. In fact, we are codependent entirely. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from the rest of the speakers on different tools and techniques to make that happen. So we put out these biodiversity finance guidelines, the first in the market. And the reason that they're important, even if you're not a bank, is because we are not going to preserve and restore nature and forests and oceans unless we start financing them properly, unless we start directing investment to the things that to date we've largely been taking for free. And so our guidelines help all kinds of issuers, investors, understand what should we allow to count as an investment in biodiversity. And so it goes into great detail for investors and financiers to say what would be an eligible activity, but that is not counted as greenwashing. Raise your hand if you've heard the term greenwashing. Raise your hand if you heard it today. Okay. So we are trying to make it easier for banks and also real sector clients to invest in nature without being accused of greenwashing. And what we just put out in Cali at the Biodiversity COP a few weeks ago was a new metrics guide. So a lot of people will say, that's great, there are certain activities we understand that count as nature positive, particularly if they are addressing the key drivers of biodiversity loss. But now how are we going to count it? How are we going to know that if we put money into it, and a company commits or a fund commits to achieving some positive impact in that space, how are we going to know that that is in fact happened? And so we've put out a metrics guide so that people can figure out what to count, because I think many of us have probably grown up hearing the adage, what get measured gets what? What get measured gets done. Exactly. So I see your lips moving, but I can't really hear you in this headset. So I invite you to check it out online. All of our work is to try and fast forward quality investments in nature. Along with that, we've put out some nature-based solutions catalogs, because I'm sure many of you interested in this space, we all know that whether it's related to flooding or extreme heat, there's so much in terms of nature-based solutions, whether it's in cities or in roads or it's around mining operations or renewable operations. There are so many ways that we can design nature-based solutions into our operations. Typically, the capital expense is lower, the operating expense tends to be lower. Why doesn't it happen all the time? One, because most engineers haven't been trained to integrate nature-based solutions into their design. And unfortunately, also, their counterparts in government who need to do the permitting of what's acceptable for a project also have not been trained in what nature-based solutions would be acceptable. And so in our effort to integrate more green versus gray infrastructure into all kinds of projects, we really need all the different parties in the ecosystem to have the same understanding of nature-based solutions and opportunities. So we've put out several catalogs, particularly for natural resource companies, for renewable companies, for roads, for cities. We also have something new called it's actually World Bank Group as a whole. It's our Global Challenge project on forests. And this is intentionally to do some innovative thinking where we put people at the center of forests, regeneration, and livelihoods, because we all know that people can't preserve forests and nature if they're starving. So if people are hungry, it doesn't matter how much they value and appreciate the ecosystems of the forest surrounding them. Like all of us, we have to feed our families. And so we're rethinking those traditional models of conservation where I think everything gets fenced off and the only jobs are given to the guards of the protected parks. And we're really thinking about different ways that we can introduce productive, regenerative buffer zones around conserved areas, the way that we can mix different kinds of trees being planted to have a combination of trees that are going to be preserved alongside different species that are going to be regenerative. And we have a lot of different investments going into that space right now. And we hope that what we do across the World Bank Group will help not only on the policy side, but also to demonstrate that these are viable, remunerative, profitable financial opportunities for investors and companies. And part of that will be through the actual sale of some of the products they're producing, and some of it will, of course, also be with carbon credits. And they'll be, usually, very often, it's going to work through a hybrid approach. One other thing that we're doing new at IFC and the World Bank Group is nature finance tracking. So you heard me give you the numbers at the start about how much we're doing in terms of climate finance. Actually, now we're forcing ourselves to track how much are we doing that is actually nature mainstreaming finance. So that will be a subset, but the idea, again, going back to what gets measured gets done, is if we have agreed with all of the other multilateral development banks on a kind of high-level methodology for how we're going to do nature finance tracking. We've all committed to doing it. And the best part is what we're already seeing is as we start to work with our investment teams to track how much nature financing we're delivering, it's changing how they design projects. It's incentivizing them to think about, well, maybe we could add a nature-based solution somewhere there where nobody was asking for it before. And again, for us, this is really not a shift away from development, but a leaning into how nature-based solutions can be also generating more livelihoods in a sustainable way. Okay, the last thing is capacity building. So Who has heard today a lot about different capacity building activities happening around the world? Thank you. Only some of you? All right, so we have this amazing program called the Green Bonds Technical Assistance Program. It is the worst name in the world, and we know this, but it recognizes what? What is the role of green bonds? What is the role of capital markets? How much money do we need to invest into nature right now? A little? A lot? Shout out. We need a lot, like hundreds of billions of dollars, like per year, to regenerate nature and to support our existing production streams and economic development. So we have a program that is really focused on capital markets and making sure that we are training banks, particularly on the continent, across Africa, to understand what is the opportunity for them to start issuing green or blue bonds that have a nature finance component, whether it's forests or oceans. How would they do that in a way that is commercially viable? What are the standards they should be operating at so they and their clients are not accused of greenwashing? And what are the other ways that they could do it to reap additional development benefits? So, for example, in Africa alone, we have already trained 400 sustainable finance leaders across 100 financial institutions, across 27 countries, and those financial institutions, those banks, have already issued $1.4 billion of green, social, and sustainably linked bonds in Africa. And in most cases, that was the first issuance for that institution, and very often it was the first issuance in that country. And that has provided a demonstration effect to show other local banks, including in local currency, how they could start taking advantage of these finance mechanisms to not only be supporting a more sustainable economy, but in many cases, taking advantage of the nature that they have in their own country. So I'm going to give you a couple quick examples because I think I'm out of time. But I just wanted to mention that you may have heard that in Colombia, we just helped issue the first ever biodiversity and nature bond with the private sector. First ever in the world. And so what's special about Colombia? Colombia is, like, per square meter, the most biodiversity diverse place on the planet. I'm sure many of you think it's in your country, but apparently, according to WWF, who we trust very much because we're here, they say Colombia per square meter is the most biodiverse. So how fitting that BBVA, a bank in Colombia, issued a $70 million biodiversity bond to address the key drivers of biodiversity loss. And that includes restoring forests, restoring waterways, supporting climate-smart agricultural practices, and also encouraging companies to work on previously degraded lands as opposed to in virgin lands. We also have an investment with Nespresso's Innovation Fund. We invested $4 million where they are helping to support smallholder farmers in resilient coffee growing, and not only helping them to use nature-based solutions to have a more productive coffee yield and a more resilient yield to keep their soil healthier, but also sustaining some very rare varieties of coffee at the same time. I'm going to give one more example, Natura in Brazil, the Amazon. You've heard of it? So we are working with a company, Natura, to do the first ever sustainability linked finance in the Amazon. So they are actually sourcing unusual rare bioingredients from the Amazon in a safe and regenerative way in partnership with local indigenous communities to put into their cosmetic line. And they are committing, and they're doing this because they have worked with local communities and understand that actually by turning these local sourcing in the Amazon of certain bioingredients makes them more sustainable and actually preserves the Amazon, because the communities living there see that they can get livelihoods in a resilient and sustainable way that is not only helping to with the health of the Amazon, but also making sure that they're feeding their families. And they're going to grow the number of bioingredients and the protected land in that space. So the last example I'll say is with Pula, because you could actually meet the CEO of Pula tomorrow, an event we're having in the Green Zone on gender and female change makers for climate. The CEO of Pula will be there. This is insurance tech. So we're all talking about adaptation, and part of adaptation is the need for insurance. And they are working across Africa and Asia with smallholder farmers using satellite imagery, mobile technology, data analysis, and it's really helping them to design index-based insurance so they can be offering accessible insurance for smallholder farmers who have never had access to insurance before, while also teaching them about more resilient applications for their farming techniques. So I really want to thank you all, because I know it's after lunch. I've spoken for a long time, and I've spoken a lot about finance, which is not really everybody's jam when they come to talk about nature. But here's what I want to leave you with. If we love nature, if we want to preserve it and restore it, if we want to continue to benefit from the ecosystems it provides, from the air cleanliness that it provides, but also if we want to support people's livelihoods so that they can support their families, we have to increase the amount of money being vested in nature. And it means that all of us, including me, have to learn more about banks and what banks do relative to nature. Because if we don't crowd in that private sector money to a very high standard, which means all of us paying attention and keeping them accountable and knowing what they're doing and what is good and not good, we will not save the nature that we're here to talk about. So that is my humble plea. Get to know a little bit more about nature finance, as I have had to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Veronica. And you're in luck. We have some bankers here, so we're going to get to that. But first, I'd love to hear from Gareth, if you don't mind, just talking through what the African Development Bank is doing, leading in this space.
Sorry, it's not personal.
Okay, the microphone's on now, so you can hear me. Thank you very much. So my name is Gareth. I'm from the African Development Bank. It was great to listen to Veronica's points, and I'm going to pick up, and I think I'll jump in. I know we're probably a bit short on time, so I'm going to start right off and say one of the problems that we have in financing adaptation and biodiversity ecosystem restoration, and by the way, I bracket adaptation and biodiversity ecosystem conservation all together, because if nature can't adapt, then in the long run it'll just be the cockroaches that survive. Everything else will go as a result of climate change. So adaptation and biodiversity is there together. So the problem we have in financing adaptation projects is that they don't have cash flows associated with them. So whilst it's great to raise the green bonds, and we've got blended finance and concessional loans and lots of insurance products and so on that we all develop, if you don't have a cash flow for your project, you can't access those things because you've got no way to pay back debt. You can't access the capital markets. And that is the fundamental problem that we have in financing adaptation, biodiversity, ecosystem conservation projects. And even in some of those examples where you have some revenue streams, it's not enough to enable you to pay back. So and this comes based on a long history, from my point of view, working in the carbon markets with the Clean Development Mechanism and emissions trading schemes and so on, and understanding a lot about the market instruments, particularly under the Kyoto Protocol, and then bringing that knowledge to the Paris Agreement. What we see is that we need to find ways to provide cash flows to adaptation projects. Sorry, now my phone's gone off and I've lost my where I was. We need to find ways to provide those cash flows so that project developers can access the capital markets. Now, we're developing an instrument at the African Development Bank called the Adaptation Benefits Mechanism, and it is designed to do exactly this. It's a project cycle that enables you to generate what we call certified adaptation benefits. And those certified adaptation benefits are designed to be sold to emitters, companies that are emitting greenhouse gases, so that they can actually make a contribution not only to mitigation, but also to start contributing towards the costs of repairing the damage done by the greenhouse gases that they emit. Because at the moment, the main focus is on mitigation. You hear a lot about finance for mitigation. Financing mitigation projects is relatively easy because most of them are energy projects and they have cash flows associated with them. But nobody, no governments, and very few private sector entities are making any contribution towards paying for the impacts caused by the greenhouse gases that they do release. So we think that developed country governments and corporates and ultimately emitters should also be making a contribution towards the cost of the damage done by the greenhouse gas emissions that they produce. And the adaptation benefits mechanism is a tool that they could use to make contribution towards those activities. Now let me tell you just briefly how it works. We create these certified adaptation benefits, and the name benefits is important because they're not credits. We're quite familiar with the carbon markets and the creation of credits, and we also see biodiversity credits, some talk around those. But there are fundamental problems with those. In the biodiversity space, I mean, there's no reason why I should be able to damage biodiversity here just because I'm protecting it over there. Maybe within a national boundary, a government might say, I'm prepared to do that, but internationally, there's no justification for that. We also see that the financing model for credits is a profit-seeking model. And typically what happened in the Clean Development Mechanism, and it's happening with ITMOs and mitigation outcomes, and it would happen with biodiversity credits if we go there, is that people who understand these things set up specialist investment banks, and those investment banks lend money to the project developers, and instead of taking cash back, they take the credits back. So, you know, if you need $5 million to build your project, and I'm the investment bank, I'll lend you the $5 million, and I'll say, yeah, don't worry about giving me cash back, give me your emission reductions. I'll value them at $10 each. And I'll collect those, and of course I'll aggregate them, and I'll sell them at $30. And I'm the one that'll make the profit, and you'll get enough just to make your project work. That is a profit-seeking model, and it's not a good use of scarce climate finance. If you approach this from a non-market approach, then we can be much better. There's much more innovative ways that we can finance those activities. So the adaptation benefits mechanism creates certified adaptation benefits. That these benefits are not fungible, they're not tradable, and they're not transferable. So you don't get any of that speculative model behind them. What you do get instead is a minimum concessionality pricing instrument because instead of having an arbitrary crediting period, we define a benefiting period that allows you to generate benefits at a price that enables you to close the financial gap on your project. So you make enough money to make your project viable, but not so much that you make a huge profit from it. We like to say you make a living from it and not a killing. And that's a much more effective use of scarce climate finance. Why do we think we should be doing this? Why do we need this instrument? Well, there isn't enough grant finance available for adaptation. We need to bring the private sector to get involved. We need private sector project developers to bring entrepreneurial skills, to bring new technologies and to solve problems. And we need the private sector in the capital markets to finance these projects. So this instrument pulls all of these things together. And it would enable governments, developed country governments, but also subnational governments to set targets for adaptation and to call upon emitters in their economies to contribute towards the costs of adaptation. That could be done on a national scale, where governments could require emitters in their economy to contribute towards those costs, and the government collect up all the information and report it through the enhanced transparency framework. Or it could be done on a subnational basis. It could be done at a city level, where city authorities could require employers or emitters in their cities to contribute towards the cost of adaptation within the urban environment. And we know that financing adaptation in that space is going to be particularly challenging. And finally, why am I raising this here? Well, I think that actually WWF's membership is a group of stakeholders who might be interested in taking these kinds of models forward. We've been trying to raise money from donor governments. We haven't been successful. I think most of the focus remains on mitigation. But actually, I think that WWF, amongst others, could be an interesting group to work with to try to raise funds to support the further development of this mechanism. I'll stop there. I know we're probably over time and look forward to further questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and always happy to work with the African Development Bank. WWF is a great partner in the multilateral system. Yotamu, I'd love to turn to you. Of course, you've heard from these, partners who have long experience working with the financial, partners and the private sector. I'm curious, from your experience, sort of what you're seeing, what the role that private finance can play in these types of deals, and just supporting nature generally. So, if you could use that microphone, thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Yotam Mwale. I'm the substantive head of treasury for Indo-Zambia Bank, but I also serve as champion for our bank's sustainable and socially responsible financing. So what we're doing in our bank is that we have a fully fledged ESG policy that sort of guides us as to what sort of transactions we should look at. Right now, we are looking at a transaction that fits squarely into the circular economy, and it speaks to plastic waste management and some of the effects it then has on a broader value chain, which would speak to SMEs, but it also speaks to the people who are most vulnerable in society. It speaks to things like improving the welfare of some of these communities when they're involved in playing a role in some of these plastic waste collection. One of the things that we have in our country is that plastic waste really has impacted lives quite negatively. We see this particularly in the metropolitan cities where it clogs drainage systems, and that tends to have a negative health effect on the population. And the most vulnerable are usually the ones that are most impacted by this. So what we're doing ourselves is that there's a transaction that we're hoping to work on in the coming year. What it seeks to do is to see an organization raise financing, which financing will be used to recycle some of this plastic waste. And as I've mentioned, it then has that trickle-down effect of actually creating sustainable livelihoods for some of these marginalized communities. Now, one of the challenges, of course, we have as an institution, but I think this is really broad-based when we look at Zambia, is that from a bank perspective, we don't have enough skills to sort of help us structure some of these transactions. A lot of the financing that we have is traditionally not suited best to sort of finance some of these transactions. And of course, there's the element that a lot of times, some of these transactions do not even come with the cash flows that we would use as a basis to finance some of these transactions. So those are some of the challenges that we're coming with. But there's a lot of hope in the future, because some of the other transactions we're seeing have an element on another deal that we hope to look at. It is a deal to do with putting up solar panels. However, what is going to happen is that when that entity that puts up the solar panels begin to generate its own electricity, some of the savings they're going to realize from that project is actually going to use to conserve an area within which they operate. Another transaction, also something to do with creating biofuels, is in such that when they start to produce energy from biofuel, a good amount of the profits they're going to make from that project is also going to use to conserve a wetland area around where this organization operates from. And again, some of the impacts, of course, will be that in some of these places, you also again have marginalized populations that will again sort of start to have sustainable livelihoods created as a result of this. Another transaction we're looking at is in the conservative farming, and again, one of the expectations is that it is again supposed to sort of create an element of inclusivity. Most of the women participants in this conservative farming idea are women, and it is expected that a number of the women that will take part in this project will actually also enhance their livelihood. So we like I initially stated as I'm concluding, we're still a new entrant into the sustainable space, and that explains why we're here at COP for the first time. And we're just hoping that we can learn more and be able to take some of the learnings back home to reshape our policies, and also to challenge the status quo in terms of what we can do as a financial system. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And it's lovely to hear that although you are new to the market, you do have some very tangible examples that you're able to highlight here today. So thank you for sharing those. Emmanuel, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to, again, the sort of role of your, institution and sort of the experience that you have.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emmanuel from Stanbic Bank. I'm the head of strategy. For us, as a bank operating in Zambia, we are very alive to what the challenges are in the climate space. Zambia, as you may be aware, is grappling with an intense drought. That's why us lose almost half of our food production last year, El Nino induced. We're hoping that the rains can recover this year so that at least we get our electricity back and we get our food production back. So as a corporate that is operating in that market, we are very, very alive to those challenges. As a bank, what we've done is there's a big river in Zambia, one of the biggest rivers in Africa called Zambezi River. So what we've done is we are trying to conserve that ecosystem by reforesting. So we've invested in that catchment area where the Zambezi River sort of originates, just to make sure that in as much as that river is threatened from climate change and not having enough rainfall, but we can do what we can to sustain it. So we are regenerating that region. And we've adopted some of the things that I think Veronica spoke to earlier, which are how do you make this sustainable? So it's not just a matter of we plant trees today and then tomorrow the trees are gone, but we've tried to ensure that we incorporate some of the challenges that the local communities face in that area. So we've brought, as part of that project, livelihood incentives for people in that local community. So what we are doing in particular is we, as an example, we are helping local people in that area keep honey in addition to agric so that when you say don't cut that tree, you can point people to something else. Say, okay, don't cut the trees, instead keep honey, instead do this kind of agriculture. So that's what we're doing, and the aim at the end of that project is to plant about 100,000 trees. So that's one area that we as a bank have invested our own money to sort of show that we are serious about this climate change, and we've put our own skin in the game. But in addition to that, as a bank, what we've seen is if we can integrate some of these things into our lending, we would then sort of multiply our efforts, because it's not then just us lending, but it's also our clients lending. So what we've done is on a portfolio basis and on a deal by deal basis, we do screen our clients for how they are going to use the money that we extend. We are gradually getting to a point as we evolve. This is a journey. This climate change, you can't just have a hard stop, won't fund this. So we're gradually moving away from things that degrade the environment, reducing exposure to those kind of things, and moving more and more into renewable projects and so forth. So we're doing this on a personal level for the individual, giving them access to finance for clean energy solutions because of the load shedding that we have. Load shedding, for those who may not experience it, is where you don't have power from the grid. So it's been quite intense in Zambia. And what we've done is we're helping our clients and the public in general to come and access facilities to put renewable solar solutions for their homes. We're also looking and helping small corporates, SMEs, small, medium scale enterprises with different solutions that can help as well, sort of clean up their operations. And on the large scale side, your blue chip companies, your large multinational companies, your farms and so forth, we have solutions for those as well. There's a number of transactions that we have in train right now. I won't speak to the details of them because it's material non-public information, but we are working with partners in that space to just see how we can either provide sustainability-linked solutions, green loans, that kind of solution, so that we help mitigate. One of the challenges that Gareth spoke to is one that we face as well, and this is just capacity for some of these projects to receive funding from entities like us. Much as we may like and want to do more, but I think there is a constraint in terms of ability of some of these partners to absorb funding from entities like ours that require structured cash flows and so forth. So our hope is that as these discussions continue and as partners like AFDB come into this space, we'll have more products that can allow us to sort of partner with entities that right now could appear to be out of our scope.
I kind of want to follow up on that one because I'm curious about the point that you were making. Is it that projects don't exist? Is it capacity? Is it both? What is it that you are seeing as far as ability to identify deals that you can actually finance?
So I think it's capacity, I would say. Projects are there, the need is there. If you come to a place like Zambia, communities will tell you that help us with this project, with this challenge that we're facing from this. But when you then look at the project, does it have the sufficient cash flows for it to repay itself? Is it structured, in a way that you can have regular repayments come through? Probably not. So those are some of the constraints that even though the need is there, the projects are identified, but the capacity for us to contribute or to support something like that is then constrained. If it was where we would typically partner is almost like a grant. So from our C budget and as part of community upliftment projects, we can then partner. We can then almost give that money to support that project. But in terms of actually going in to say, here's the term sheet, this is the interest rate, this is how the cash flows would come in, that is difficult. Also, the other challenge that we've seen is scale of these projects. Yep. So for a lot of them, you find they're in different places and they're small. So to again go in, there's a small need here, there's a small need. When you look at everything in totality, the need is big. But because of how spread out it is, it makes it difficult for us to go in and support as much as we can. So a sort of aggregation too would then help. Yeah. So I think those are the next steps that we need to work towards as a bank and also just as an industry, a financial industry, where we can sort of aggregate these projects and then support. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Chali, I'd love to hear from you, the Zambia National Commercial Bank, sort of what you are seeing, what experience you have in the projects that you are able to finance.
Thank you very much, and I'll start by introducing myself as well and what I do at the bank. Is that too much? Is that?
Sorry?
Is the mic? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my name is Charlie, and I work at Zanaco as Chief Commercial Officer. For those that might not know who Zanaco is, it's a local bank that is partly owned by some international investors in Arise. Arise is made up of No Fund, FMO, and Rabobank, and they own 46% shareholding. 25% shareholding is owned by IDC on behalf of the Ministry of Finance in Zambia, and 10% is made up of National Pension Scheme Authority, and then 19% is free floating on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. We are a universal bank. Our segments and communities that we are playing in range from the mass market customers. These are very small customers that are mostly serviced by digital solutions. We've got the traditional retail customers. We've got SMEs. We've got agriculture. We've got local and large corporates. We also have got multinationals. We are found in all the 10 provinces of our country, and predominantly both in urban and rural areas. And we serve our customers through the traditional brick and mortar, the agency banking model, as well as the digital channels. I always like to share something about the reason why Zanaco exists, and that obviously forms the purpose. We were established just for two reasons. One, financial inclusion, and two, contribution towards economic development of our country. And that purpose still rings through our strategy up to this point. And it's important that we reflect on that because it has led us to serve certain markets, and this is where we are seeing a lot of impact in as far as climate change is concerned. So the rural places that I spoke to will tell a real story of what's happening in the communities that we are serving in. From an experience perspective, with regards to the journey of sustainability, this is the fourth COP we are attending. We've learned quite valuable lessons. We've been accredited by the Green Climate Fund, GCF, another milestone that we thought would help in our journey of sustainability. We've accessed funding from the British International Investment, BII, another milestone that I think has been great in as far as our journey is concerned. We've accessed funding from EIB as well, and we're in partnership with the Frankfurt Business School. That helps us in terms of capacity building for both our customers and our staff. We recently held a sustainable finance symposium in the country, and the idea was that we create more awareness, we create a platform where customers can interact, share knowledge, and build capacity in their own respective transition journeys. We've done some tree planting programs. Our aim is to do 1 million trees in the next 2 years. We are over 500,000 trees, and we've partnered with like-minded organizations that are helping us in that journey. We've built a very strong pipeline for businesses that would like to access finance from this, the funds that I've spoken to. But the story hasn't gone without its own share of challenges. And I would just like to share a few of those. The funding that we've attracted in most cases has come out to be very expensive. And we're not surprised because obviously our country is not in the space that it's supposed to be. So sovereign risk is high. And most of the DFIs that we've been working for do factor that in. But our view is it does slow down the very reason that we started being on the sustainability journey. So our view is the DFIs, the likes of IFC, the likes of AFDB need to be able to look at that and see how best we can manage the sovereign risk versus the very objective that we are trying to drive. The other challenge that we've seen is the tenor. The tenors are very short. I think the largest tenor that we've gotten is 7 years. But when you look at the pipeline that we have and most of the models that our customers are trying to introduce as they transition, they need longer tenors for them to be able to generate cash flows and be able to repay the facilities. The other aspect that we're seeing is the need for a blended finance sort of packages, because most of these customers are just transitioning. They need to learn a lot more. So technical assistance should be incorporated in most of this funding, and also the ability to just build capacity trainings and all that will be very, very critical for us to have a successful transition. And in other cases, we're seeing customers that need to do a lot of heavy lifting before they become bankable. So we do think the aspect of grants will be very important. For customers that need to access sustainable finance, we want them to do things that include environmental impact assessment. And some of these initiatives are very, very expensive. And you realize that even if you are holding funding from GCF or BII, if the customer doesn't have the environmental impact assessment, you won't be able to bank them. So they're not ticking that box. How can we ensure that the funding includes handholding these customers so that they become bankable and we are able to disburse? A few other challenges that we've seen is just the pace of disbursement. it's taking way too long to just get all the boxes ticked. Some of the lead time include more than a year. Now, we asking our customers to look at opportunities and use green method or environmental friendly models to transition. Now that's an opportunity. If you wait for that long, there will be someone who will come in and take that opportunity away. And chances are such that those that are coming in actually are not using environmental friendly models. So there's need for us to look at the bureaucracy that is there in as far as disbursements are concerned, and that are hampering the drive towards sustainable finance and also the impact that comes with it. The other one that we've seen as a challenge is just our ability to build incentives as we package most of these financing initiative or packages. We've worked with organizations that work with smallholder farmers that have been living in and around game reserves. So obviously their history has been that of poaching, which is killing game animals. And now they're being transitioned into better farming methods. Emmanuel talked about beekeeping. They're also doing some cropping, as it were. We need to have solutions that would create incentives for these farmers or indigenous people not to go back to their ways of life. Others are those that have been cutting down trees to do charcoal, and it's interesting that their dependence on charcoal burning is linked to their survival. So whenever we are telling them about the negative impacts of charcoal burning, we need to realize that they need to feed their children. So what sort of programs are we putting in place so that that transition does not put the risk of their own children in even higher risks? So those would be some of the challenges that we've seen in the market. But I'd just like to make a few comments regarding why we feel we need to do more as Zanaco and why we feel DFIs like IFC and FDB need to work with us. We've got one of the strongest balance sheets in the market. We're a profitable business. We're a universal banking or running a universal banking model, meaning that we can impact a wide range of our customer. We've got the largest customer base in the market right now, so we can operate in rural areas, we can operate in urban areas, and along the value chains, and also working with customers that we need to help transition to cleaner business models, but also those that are being impacted heavily. So how can we, Zanaco stands as one of those key partners that can help with this transition journey. We've got a history of partnerships, as I indicated, having been accredited with GCF, having had some capital signed up with BII and EIB, that also has given us some lessons that we can use and also be able to create even stronger partnerships to open doors for more new capital. We've had to incorporate our sustainability into our strategies, sustainability framework, so align the ESG framework with international standards. We've developed easy products. For instance, Emmanuel did speak to the challenges that we have in as far as energy is concerned at the moment. We've got products that can easily give alternative energy solutions to our customers. So we're kind of nimble to ensure that we introduce those products. And I think overall, we just stand ready to push this agenda of sustainability, learn more from our colleagues, our peers. We do feel that more banks need to participate. It's refreshing to know that Indo is starting that journey. And there'll be a lot of deals that will need to partner and risk share. We want to also risk share with DFIs as well. If they cannot give us funds for on lending, we can risk share as well using our own balance sheet. So those are some of the things that are happening in Zanaco at the moment.
Well, thank you, my goodness. There is so much that we can dive into. I will say we only have a few minutes left. So what I would propose is this. You two have heard from these partners about a couple of a number of hurdles, right, to getting these deals done. Are they bankable? Are there enough of them? Is the capacity there? Is there a way to make sure that there is a development component so that the partners with whom you are working have some sort of a revenue stream for their families so that they can feed their families and not be asked to forego anything? So I'm going to ask you for top 2 tools that you can think of in the IFC and the AFDB to provide, to actually activate some of these, this momentum that these private financial institutions have outlined. So top 2, please.
Let me jump in, and I'm going to go back to the adaptation benefits mechanism that I tried to explain, probably not very well, being too close to lunchtime. But look, the ABM, it is designed to provide those cash flows that would make the projects bankable. And because we're working in this non-market mechanism where the price of the adaptation benefits is designed to plug the financial gap, it means that you can internalize the transaction costs. So the costs associated with the environmental social impact assessments, the project design, the methodology, the financing costs, the interest rates, all of those can be bundled up and said, these are all costs associated with my project, and I need money to cover all of them before it becomes viable. And we use that total cost to determine the price of the adaptation benefits that are for sale. Now, there's other costs that we wouldn't accept being in there, so it has to be transparent, and we will audit that. They have to be genuine costs to make sure that the buyer is getting value for money. But that is our intention, to try to cover all the costs associated with the development of the project activity, which then gives you sufficient cash flow for you to borrow money from, in this case, from a commercial entity. At the outset, we anticipate that no regular bank is going to recognize a certified adaptation benefit or a purchase agreement for those. So we anticipate we'll need to initially finance those things ourselves. But and that's what we can do as the African Development Bank. But the alternative would be also to create guarantees that would give confidence to other lenders. And Swedish IDA have indicated that they're very interested in guarantees supporting biodiversity. So we have a foot in the door there. So I think the adaptation benefits mechanism is specifically designed to address the barriers, the challenges that we're facing. And just one more thing on the scale. This is a real issue because, a lot of small-scale adaptation projects, they're looking for $50,000 or $100,000, maybe $1 million. You can't go to the GCF for $1 million. So we need instruments that are able to be transacted at a small scale. And again, because we can internalize all of those transaction costs, we can do that. And there will be buyers out there who want to support small-scale projects. And they'll say, look, we realize the transaction costs are higher, but we want to reach out to these communities to help them with the beekeeping or to help them with the climate-resilient agriculture. And so and we're happy to pay for that because it's transparent and we can see we're getting value for money. So that's my pitch for the adaptation benefits mechanism.
Yeah,
Thank you.
wonderful. You've got about 1 minute.
2 words. Well, 3 words. Blended finance is the first word. So we are spending a lot of time talking to private philanthropies in new ways. They're not going to fix this for us, but they have high appetite for some early risk to seed some really innovative projects. And so we'll be talking a lot this week. You'll hear IFC and the World Bank Group about blended finance with new and unique partners. So please pay attention for that. In addition, the capacity building and the technical support specific for the continent. So we are launching with the World Bank Group and several other partners this new Sustainable Finance Knowledge Center. It will be both virtual in French and English, as well as gathering face-to-face and building an alumni network. What we have found most in the 7 years that we've been doing the Green Bonds Technical Assistance Program is the alumni and the alumni network. Not only did they become leaders and champions in their own institutions, they actually become the champions and leaders in their countries, in their markets. And even when so first of all, the training that they get makes them highly marketable within their countries and internationally, but they rarely leave the financial space. And so supporting them as an alumni network to help each other solve problems, figure out how to crowd in different partners, borrow each other's strategies, figure out how they got different parts of the bank on board to do something innovative. That has been really I think the enduring legacy beyond actually the capital issued has been this cadre of banking leaders on the continent. And so really, I think we invite you to tap into that and to become part of that network with us. So we also can be learning from you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. We could have gone on for another 2 hours, but thank you all for coming. This was really a wonderful conversation.